Good morning. Good morning. My name is Andrea with Happy Cloud Creations, and I am jumping on today because it is week 1 of the Infinite Night Helix Quilt Along. I'm here over on Facebook and on Instagram. There will be a little live button on the top. If this is live, if that's gone, that means you're watching a replay. I just wanted to go over the cutting instructions. That's what we're doing on week 1. If you have any questions about cutting this pattern out, please let me know. Hello, Linda. Yay, I can see comments. Hello, Mom in Attleboro. Yay, okay. So if you guys have questions, let me know. I'll try to remember everything that I wanted to get through today. So you'll open up your pattern before you decide to start cutting. The one thing you want to do is figure out if you're going to go with the 4 at a time flying geese. So the pattern is designed with the 4 at one time flying geese. If you're making the baby size, you don't need to do any flying geese. Because the flying geese only appear in these, side columns. And in the baby size, you really only have these 3 bursts, and so you don't have any side columns. So next week we'll be making the flying geese, so you won't have to worry about that if you're making the baby size. But if you are making one of the larger sizes, the very last page of the pattern has alternative methods to making flying geese. If you don't want to make the 4 at one time, you can make them with the 1 at a time flying geese, or you can make them with half square triangles. Half square triangles might be one of the easiest methods, just because a lot of people are familiar with making half square triangles. The only problem is you get a seam down the center, which if you're using something that's more of a print, not a solid, you might like the look of no seam down the center. So the 1 at one time is an easier method as well. 4 at one time, you just have to be a little more precise with your sewing and trimming of these blocks. But I'll go over the flying geese next week, and I'll go over all 3 methods. So pick out which method you want to do. And page 2 and 3 are your cutting instructions. So if you notice, the larger sizes, they tell you right next to them, FG, 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 that means flying geese. So if you're using one of these alternative methods, don't cut out the pieces that say FG next to them, and then you can cut out the pieces on this alternative method. My biggest tips for cutting is, first, you want to press your fabric so it's nice and flat. I still need to press mine because when you get it, a lot of times it's going to have little wrinkles, and it might affect your cutting because it might not lay perfectly flat. So you're going to want to press it. If you can't get the seams out, sometimes it helps to use a little water, spray bottle, if your iron doesn't have steam. I usually use steam when I do my fabric, or a little extra help from a spray bottle to get those creases out. And then when I'm cutting all my fabric out, I like to cut the biggest pieces out first to smallest pieces. So that's why in my instructions, it typically will show the largest piece to the smallest, so that, okay, I'm going to cut the 5.5 by 5.5 inch pieces out first, and then I'll cut the 4.5 by 6.5. If you're good with math, you might realize, oh, 5.5, 5.5, I do a whole strip of that. Well, I could get 2 rows of 2.5 out of that as well. So you might want to jump down to 2.5 by 2.5s, or the 2.5 pieces to complete that row, if that makes sense. I just like cutting out the big pieces and then cutting smaller pieces around them. So that's why there's one part of the pattern that I have down here, pieces around the blocks. These pieces are going to be the biggest pieces in color D that are in the larger size quilts. The baby size, it just calls it side pieces, which you can wait to cut those out until the end. I factored in enough fabric so that if you were like, I want to wait to cut these pieces around the blocks and my border pieces, because let's see if you see the pattern. So these are the blocks, and then actually next to these blocks there's going to be chunks of fabric in between to finish out the block. So me personally, I just cut out the pieces for the blocks. I waited to do the pieces around the blocks and the border pieces, just because you're not using those till the very end, so I just waited. If you are somebody that your blocks always end up the perfect size, that's awesome. If you are measuring your units as you make them and sewing them together into your blocks should end up the correct size. If you're somebody that, say, your blocks always end up a little bit bigger than a quilt pattern says, that's when you might want to go, okay, maybe I'll wait to cut these out, because you don't want these pieces that go around your block to be too small. If you're somebody that's, my blocks always end up a little bit smaller because I don't have a correct 1/4 inch foot. If you cut these pieces out in the beginning, they might be a little bit bigger than your block, which is easier to adjust than if these pieces that go around your block are too small. So it's up to you if you want to cut them out from the get-go or not. I know some fabrics fray a lot, and so that's another reason why I like to wait to cut those pieces, since I know I'm not going to use them till the very end. So might as well not have these pieces cut and start fraying in the meantime, because our last week is November 8th, so that's a long ways away. Let's see. Cutting. So press, and then when you're cutting, I recommend using the same brand of ruler throughout. Personally, I have a couple different brands, and I noticed that like when I cut using this brand, it's Omni Grip, versus, oh man, it's like stuck to the table, Olfa. Just because the thickness of the lines are slightly different, sometimes the pieces don't end up exactly the same if you're using two different brands of rulers. But if you're using all Omni Grip or all Olfa, all the measuring units will be the same, if that makes sense. I noticed that when I bought this new one, because I was like, all you would need for this pattern is the standard 6x24. But I saw this one, and it's 8.5 by 24, and I was like, ooh, why not get one that's a little bit wider? So I got this, and I noticed it is slightly different than my Fiskar. So I think it's because the lines might be slightly bigger than the Fiskar. I'm not sure. Is there any questions regarding the cutting of your pattern? I'm trying to think. Another reason to wait on your border is if you finish your quilt and you're like, you know what, I want my border to be bigger than Andrea's pattern says. Then you haven't cut this border out that is a little too small for your preference. Or if you're like, you know what, I like the size of it, I don't even need the border. So that's why you're better off just waiting to cut the border until the very end. I'm trying to think, any questions out there? I know there's people out there watching. So next week we'll be making the flying geese, which if you're doing the baby size, there's no flying geese, so you can take your time cutting if you'd like, or you can just have next week as a little break. And we'll also be making the small arrow units, which are basically these little arrow units on the stars on the side panels. Oh, sorry, Instagram, cutting you off. So next week we'll be doing that, which I guess I can just show you. So we'll be making the flying geese on page 4, and then we're making these arrow units on the bottom of page 4. Which, this parts of the quilt along are a little slow paced, but then other parts are probably like a little jam-packed, because once you get all the units done, I like doing that. I like making all my units ahead of time. So like the diamonds in rectangle and the diamonds in squares and all the flying geese and all the arrow units. Once all those specific units are done, once you go to start making all these blocks, they'll go together super quick, because it's like, oh, I'm just sewing pieces together. So that's what my hope is. I'm hoping this is like one of the most in-depth patterns that I've designed. It has what, like 22 pages, 21 pages. And the font is slightly smaller than most of my patterns. I did 11 instead of 12, hoping to cut down on the pages that you would have to print at home. So if you are a beginner, this might not be the perfect pattern to start off first. This is more of an intermediate, since there are so many pieces to cut and keep organized. Which, another thing, one of my testers, she recommended, since there are so many pieces that are similar sizes, a lot of people will like to just take a little piece of paper, write color A, this size, and put that on that stack of paper just to keep organized, so that you don't be like accidentally grabbing the wrong stack of fabric sized and use the wrong thing in the wrong piece. So just try to keep organized. Sometimes it depends. Sometimes I'm organized like that, and then sometimes I just like go and measure my pile right before I grab them. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to tell you guys. If you're doing one of the larger sizes like me, I'm doing the king size. There's an extra note down here for king and queen size. When you are cutting out color D pieces around the blocks for king and queen size, these pieces are very large. So one of them I ended up cutting a strip that was 22.5 inches by width of fabric, and then I cut like the 11.5, so it was like cutting this way instead of cutting long and skinny this way. Just, I figured you can get more pieces out of the fabric that way, if that makes sense. So I put a little note down here, so make sure to read that if you're making the king or queen size. I'm making the king size. This is the first time. So this is my little centers of my stars. This is my helix. And oh, 9 yards of fabric for the backing fabric. It calls for 8.5, but the shop I bought it from only does yard cuts. So I'll have a little extra, which I don't mind. And so when you're cutting that large of fabrics, what I like to do, so some of them are pretty large. So once I iron it, smaller pieces are easier to manage, right? So once you iron it, you kind of want to even up the sides, and then, you know, make sure the bottoms are parallel, and then you can trim up your side of your fabric. So I kind of like, what I do with a really large piece of fabric is I will still iron it, and then I'll just find a big spot in my house where I can kind of try to lay it out and get it all even, so that I haven't ironed these yet because this one is gigantic. And also pinching this crease, because this crease doesn't totally come out. I'll try to kind of like go like this and shake it to make it all lay flat again once you've, because when you iron it, I pull it all apart and iron it, if that makes sense. Viola says, I get a sandwich bag, label them, and then I have it where it belongs and not all mixed up when I knock it off of me. Oh, that's a smart idea, putting it in little bags. And if you do put them in little bags, you can save the bags for your next project. It's not like you have to waste those. I've done that before. I just have a bunch of little Ziploc bags over my sewing desk that I can just reuse for my next quilt project. Because, yeah, sometimes it's like, if you just have a stack of all these little squares and then you have a cat, or you have a dog, or you have a child come and knock them, or even my clumsy self knock them. You know, sometimes it's like I go to sew and I'm like, I'm missing a few squares, and then, oh, I find them under the table. So that's good. Good idea. Ziploc bags. I think that's about it. And sorry about all the ums. I have a problem with saying all the time, right? But yeah, I'm really excited to sew this with you guys. A few people have started posting their fabric selections over in the Facebook Quilt Along group. I know a lot more people are quilting along with us over in the Facebook Quilt Along group than on Instagram. I think there's still a few over on Instagram. But there's a lot over in the Facebook Quilt Along group. So if you need inspiration for fabric, you might want to go over there if you have Facebook. If not, you can go to my first blog that has all the pictures of the quilt pattern testers, and there's a variety of different fabrics they used, which can kind of give you inspiration. Like, so I picked these out. It's king size for a bed, and then my husband, he was looking at the tester pattern. He's like, "Ooh, well, that's cool fabric. That's cool fabric." I'm like, "I already bought all this fabric. This is what I'm using, so we're good." So if you already have your fabric, maybe don't go look at other people's fabric picks. I think that's about it for cutting your fabric this week. Once you've got it all cut, take a photo and post it and share it with us. You can post in the Quilt Along group. I think the sun is coming in here. Oh, sorry guys, making the light all weird. Sorry. Post a picture in the Quilt Along group, or you can post a picture on Instagram with the hashtag Infinite Night Helix QAL. I'll be looking at those to see if you guys are posting over there. And then next week, I think I will jump on Wednesday at 10:30 to do the live video, because I realized I have an appointment Tuesday morning, so I can't do it Tuesday morning. So I'll jump on Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time, which is West Coast United States. And I'll jump on. The videos will be saved to the platforms, and then I will also upload the video to YouTube so that people can watch it later if they miss it, because I'll be going over the flying geese. Some people have never made flying geese, so if you haven't, make sure to watch that. If you ever have any questions, you can email me at happycloudcreations@gmail.com, or send me a little message on Instagram or Facebook and through my business page, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you later.